Um, as Heidi said, this is informal, so let's sort of try and talk as much and share as much as we can in the spirit of collaboration. This morning, what Jessica and Kelly gave excellent presentations that really set the scene, and I want to sort of draw on a lot of those concepts about how we use it. This is sort of very much a pragmatic approach. The reason that I talk about students involved in assessment of learning outcomes is one thing that everyone tells me about students is that one thing students do is they go straight to see what is the assessment involved. So if we can get them involved right from the beginning, I think that's one of the more useful ways that we can assess. Basically, my background, I'm presently a National Senior Teaching Fellow. I was an AOTC Fellow about 10 years ago as well, and I have a Professor of Life as well as a nursing director role at Princess Alexandra Hospital. I think one thing it's important at this stage to acknowledge, working integrated learning can be very different across all the disciplines. When I talk to people in business and science, I really get blown away about how much they engage students in working integrated learning. I think some of those disciplines have actually moving forward in getting the benefits from students. One story that I'd just like to share from my nursing experience in nursing as a colleague, we have this sort of sit and soak students, a bit like science students, just tell me everything you know. So nursing students are called sit and soak. And one particular day I reminded there was a student on a working integrated learning placement, because what happens is, as nurses, a student comes and they're sort of there, oh look, there's so many sort of safety issues and so many things that need to be learned in a clinical environment. I just have to keep telling them what they need to know. So nursing students come and they sort of flip their lips and it's sort of like all the information goes in. And there was a particular Griffith student, she was on a nursing placement in the community, and this nurse had actually visited the patient and they got back in the car to go and see the next patient. And the registered nurse actually looked at the student and said, so what was your assessment of that woman? How would you sort of see what was happening? And the student looked at her and said, I'll have to think about that. No one's ever asked me what I thought before. So I think what we're seeing is there's very diverse experiences where sometimes students will go and there are lots expected of them. So I think that there's an enormous amount of diversity in this place. So just by way of introduction, graduate capability and employability are regarded as pretty success factors. They're all the words that are being bandied around at the moment. And this is important from the university's perspective, the industry and the student, because students are all looking at employability now too, because all those stats are readily available. So working integrated learning has become very popular, just by way of that now. Now, the premise for this presentation, and I know Carol Joyce in the room, and Carol has actually, in her 2008 scoping report, provided all the definitions around service learning or work learning, and there's many connotations of what working integrated learning could be. So today, what I particularly want to talk about is work-based learning, and by that I'm referring to something very specific. It refers to student learning, supported by learning and teaching strategies that occur in real-world context, under organised supervision, and one of the critical factors is it counts towards academic credit as part of the compulsory component of a degree. So it's not the volunteer program, the PACE program at Macquarie University, where every student is involved in a voluntary program. They are actually all for credit. Many universities have lots of opportunities for volunteer work, those sorts of things, but they're about extending student capabilities. They're not always for credit. So what I want to talk about is those which is for credit. Now, governance and will. So the relationship here is there are many existing, well-established and effectively performing structures and processes around the world. And if you've actually read some of the great work, and I refer once again to Carol Joyce's OLT report 2008, explores all the work that's been done in this space. So what governance is just exploring the organisation and coalescence of these structures and processes and purposes to ensure the attainment of relevant outcomes for students. So it's a way of putting all these pieces of the puzzle together. So, because we have lots of great work that people are doing, but it's about a bit of a sort of a checklist of how it all works. So the reason why this is so important, and the reason why students are so to empower students, the theme for today is engaged, equipped, and empowered. The reason that students are so pivotal to all of this is that universities are responsible for managing the work-based program. However, the learning environment is distant from university campus. You can't manage that. So the challenge is therefore to ensure attainment of learning outcomes that are desired by the student, the university and the industry. And to get the student as the active partner in that is actually a key ingredient to it actually working. So why develop a government, a collaborative, I call it collaborative governance, which fits in with the theme of what Kelly was saying about collaboration. So the collaborative governance framework is a framework to guide and organise the structures and purposes of the university, the industry and the student to facilitate work-based experiences that facilitate the realisation of their learning outcomes. So just as by way of definition, this is in the sort of the public policy literature, but I particularly like it for the purposes of will and governance. Is that a governing arrangement is when one or more public agencies directly engage in non-state stakeholders in a collective decision-making process. So I see the collective decision-making process as the university, the industry and the student. So they're the people that are involved in that process. It's formal, so it's deliberate, planned together, and it aims to make or implement public policy or manage a public program. So when I see the public program, that's the work integrated learning and the outcome of the credit for the student. So that's by way of background. So this is what I'm going to go through. This is just sort of at a glance. What I want to talk about is that this is the attainment of learning outcomes in this sort of box, but it is about how all these come together to reach that attainment of learning outcomes at the end and the assurance of that. So what I will do is that I will talk about the university and industry requirements because you actually need the structures and processes in the university and industry. However, I particularly want to focus on the student pathway, but it's important that the other structures and processes are there for the university and industry to enable that student pathway. So that's just by way of summary. So, and I don't want to go into this in detail. This is actually a summary of all the reports that you need for TECSID. You know the Higher Education Learning Standards that come effective in January 2007. This is actually what you need to do, what the standards say. It's about effective curriculum, assessment, facilities, infrastructure, staff, resourcing, communication, and all of that is actually needed for will. So basically, the provisions from the university are actually there already saying this is what you have to do. Now from the industry, this is not as clear cut because the industries actually have a purpose. They're a commercial enterprise. They don't have a reason to have all the logistics about getting students in place. So when it comes to the industry structures, it's about good collaborative arrangements, good collaborative process, and getting buy-in from the university. And later the buy-in from the industry. Later I'm going to talk about outcomes. But of course, the outcomes from the industry are they get a larger pool of graduates, they get exposure to new ideas, that sort of thing. So it's almost like the university needs to convince the industry to put these good structures in place, to put the logistics in, to ensure that staff can supervise because of these informal outcomes. But most importantly, what we're talking about today are the student structures. So what is important is that there are structures for the student so that they're provided with information about work-based learning structures. So the first one is that students locate and familiarise themselves with learning outcomes in university degree and engage with the learning outcomes. And so when I talk about co-creation, and I appreciate I've stolen that word from Kelly because I've been to a lot of her workshops, is that what their meaning of the learning outcomes are. And I was particularly enthralled with Jessica this morning that as a first year student, she was familiar with the pharmacy competency standards. In 2012, I was working for the Australian Learning and Teaching Council. I was Discipline Scholar for Health, and a colleague of mine, Maria O'Keefe, who's a paediatrician and Dean in the University of Adelaide, and she and I worked on the learning outcomes for health, which was across 26 health disciplines. So I am very familiar with the learning outcomes. What we did is we took all the accreditation standards across all the well-established disciplines like pharmacy and nursing and medicine and leadership, and we came out with 6 common learning outcomes for health. So there are the learning outcomes, but there are also the resources and opportunities for students to explore self-awareness and professional identity, and it was quite interesting that that's what Jessica spoke about this morning, how important professional identity was. So, as I've said, the first thing is about familiarising the students with learning outcomes, which fascinating Jess spoke about this morning. So what I wanted and for people to talk about, because you're asking these little tables just for 2 or 3 minutes, I don't have a timing device, is one thing that I was interested in with Jessica's talk this morning is she said that there was a professional, a pharmacy professional practice subject, and they were introduced to the learning outcomes there. So what I wanted each of you to explore for 2 minutes is, are there specific learning outcomes for your degree course, which of course there are because TEQSA actually stipulates that, so I'm sure you have that. And you're able to show that when you're going for accreditation. So what exposure do the students have to these learning outcomes? When are they exposed to them? Is it something that they generate through osmosis through their term of the degree and then they read on the website that this is their attributes that they have, or is it something that you formally introduce? So I'll just give you 2 minutes to talk amongst yourselves around what are the processes in your degree as the students are exposed to the learning outcomes and what opportunity do they have to engage with them and to make sense of those. And any questions around what learning outcomes are?
Really, learning outcomes are pretty much passive because they're available there before every decision links to every assessment group. So they're there for students to see questions and instructions to look at it, engage with it. For students and the connections between learning outcomes when we're doing it. So students are able to rely on business and service learning so they can achieve success. We're very encouraged about students. So hence my comment earlier. Yes. What does that mean? We've been talking about how do you get to some extent students to evaluate themselves. Hello. What does it actually mean? How do they distill for themselves? Yeah. I think not in the learning community. So that's what selection management. Well, I can see everyone. Which is essentially in the course.
Yeah, okay. I think everyone's sort of, this is, there's obviously a lot of discussion in this sort of area, so I might be probably for lunch to continue a bit further.
It's about being open
But I just wanted people to say how many people sort of identified that the learning outcomes were made available and widely discussed in the first year of the program? No one. Second year program? What about a capstone experience when they're about to graduate with people who've got, so we've got a yes here for that. So often they're not at the beginning. So one thing I thought when Jessica this morning said, in my first year of the program, I went to the pharmacy competency stand, I think I fell off the chair. I thought, wow, what a proactive student she is. Because usually they are introduced to students right at the end. And as I said, from the OLT website, there's health, law and engineering, there's creative arts, there's science, there's, yes.
My perception of this is I think recruiting thinkers, we might have this on a course level, but as academics, I don't think we're engaged on a program level enough individually. So there's a disconnect. I do it at risk, but at a very individual level.
Yes,
So it needs to happen at that, I'm studying to be a pharmacist. So my lifespan on my cycle is 3 to 4 years. So it's got to happen at that level, but we disconnect as academics from.
And I love Kelly's comment this morning where she said that we spend all this time mapping the curriculum, but if you've got the students in, they'd be able to actually help you with how the specific course runs and how they're contributing to the overall profile. So that's food for thought after the day. So the next thing is resources and opportunities for students to explore self-awareness and professional identity. And this was the other thing that Jessica spoke about this morning that was really important. And what is presently used in this space? I know that there was because the deans of Associate Deans Teaching and Learning for Science are very active in this space at the moment, and I've been to a number of their presentations. And one of the things that the University of Melbourne uses is when students go out on placement, they get them to do a Myers-Briggs profile. And it's interesting, Griffith University has a lot of these profiles for students to explore, because lo and behold, my daughter, who's at secondary school, brings home this document that she's been asked to fill out and complete about their strengths and attributes, and it's all produced and comes from Griffith University. And I thought that's a fascinating document. So there's a lot of work, but actually, are we using them in the program? What courses? And so I think it's worth thinking of that. One, and this is, I just wanted to share a couple of these. These all come from the TILE. Are you familiar with TILE? Once again, Dawn Bennett was a ALTC fellow. She's now a National Senior Teaching ALT fellow as well, who is extending a lot of this work around identity. And I was quite fascinated this morning how much Jessica spoke about professional identity. These are some of the discussions that students have that are in the TILE program, and this is a website, and you can easily sign up to get. They've got a whole heap of resources where the students talk about things I like and I do well, things I don't like to do well, you can win. But what it is that, and if you look and go to the discussions around this work, is that they're encouraging students to do these discussions in groups and to really, so then they become quite converse in explaining to people what it is and that sort of thing. So there are certainly lots of resources. And this is another one of their trials. There's lots of them. So I just chose picked out a couple for today. And this is what the engineers do. This is Dawn Bennett worked with Sally Mail, an engineer. And so it's about 3 characteristics of an engineer. How do you know? What are your differences? Why are you consider this profession? What do you want to achieve? Now it's interesting with professions like engineering or nursing, a very prescribed sort of profession. It can be quite clear. Well, the students think it's quite clear what's expected of them. It's quite interesting. When we go to the science disciplines, they're not nearly as clear cut. And it's interesting. I was at a workshop at the University of Queensland, and Kelly, you may be interested in this because they're doing a lot of work in science around this, and they've actually got funding for a project that they're doing with science students. And there's a document that talks about all the sorts of things that science students, where they end up. And so what they collectively got these students to do, one of them was history or something. And so what the students had to do is talk about, okay, if a science student ends up working as an historian, what skills are they taking from science? And so the students then had to explore, well, how does someone that's been taught in the sciences that's working in history, and so they've been running workshops with students, getting them to think very laterally around what it is their skill set. So there's a lot of different sorts of activities going on in this space around getting students to think what their skill sets are. So going back to university processes, is that the university needs clear-cut processes, because I think what was coming out this morning, and Kelly, you sort of alluded to it, is that everyone talks about the challenges in this space. And the thing is that the students need to be guided. We can't say, oh, students, this is a curriculum and they be active participants. We need to sort of put these sort of, envelopes around them to sort of guide and get the best out of it. So the critical thing about the university, of course, is communication. They need to liaise with the industry around student capacities, abilities and expectations. And this needs to be done in a creative way, not in a form of, when a lot of the clinical facilities will go to the university and they'll say, oh, what can your students do? Can they give out medications? Can they do dressings and those sorts of things? And we need to move beyond these sort of checklists of what the student can do to talk about what the capabilities and what you'd expect, how the students to engage in the learning opportunities in the workplace. And then the next thing is that support for the student to build the capabilities through the effective teaching and learning, in particular professional behaviours communications. And so once again, I might get you to just talk amongst yourselves now for another 3 to 4 minutes about what are the provisions in your program around having things like exploring self-identity, exploring the applicability of the sets that they're learning to different disciplines. What are the provisions in the program? Where are they, and what do they look like? So do you want to just have another 3 to 4 minutes? And if each table has a good one, I might just get you to share it through.
Oh, wait a second. I don't
Yes, so I'm just wanting some, I've just been asked for clarification. Just think about, the self-identity exercises like tile exercises. Are there any provisions where before they go on the placement, they're given some sort of preparation around their sort of ability to explore their self-identity, improve communication skills? Is there any sort of provisions in the program before they go on their placement?
And it's a virtual area so
So that's what it says. It'll be assessed. It could be put in so, and then the other one. Yep.
And I actually took that.
Was that for group?
It is a group work. What we're looking for was an assessment.
So what you thought of your input to the project, the way I do that is I give them 100% to spend, and they are not allowed to spend it, and they nominate constituents.
Right, so Mark, I think that's I've just earlier, I think this was literally a mark to yourself, and it was so abused. There was a disincentive to the students that truly invested in it. And I give myself I looked at that and said, well, actually, here's what I did wrong. I know what I did wrong. And the students said, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm giving myself 10.
Yes, but if you have a system where it's realistic, commented on.
Yeah. It's another problem because that's something that is useful. I'm with them as a team. It's not a ability task, it's just it's a team reflection. But I'm always aware that there is there have been problems with activities that the schools have given themselves a chance to how do you ask questions. So I think it's open to this. The second you get more solutions and feedback, I think my responsibility but still
I always find scientists, I find those things very difficult because there's that element of people will, it is subjective. And you remember, if you've got a class, you've got people across so many different areas of that class. But we all work with people, and all the people you work with. How many people do you think, and this is political obviously, I know people in my department, they'll talk themselves up about the minute little things that they do, they'll tell you how fantastic and brilliant they all are, right? But the other person will do all this stuff, not claim any credit. The students in the class are going to be, you'll have those range of people as well, so they'll have the ones that always say, I'm a 10, even though they might have done nothing. You've got people who are claiming 3s and 4s, but they actually have engaged. So, as a scientist, I find it really difficult to have that type of assessment.
Has each table got an example of one good example of provisions in their course or program?
Yeah,
I'm going to let it handle this.
Yeah, because it's difficult. I've
just
got
one
in
good
my
one
version with it.
from each table. Is that possible?
Yeah, I do, but I have the blessing of a 40 credit point 4 unit course to do stuff that makes a difference. This is the Commonwealth Games internship. So I use actually just, because it was a group of product, I use the Freudenberg and Grimwald survey that they developed around self-identity. And I like it because it comes in a whole range. They've got it, it's quite extensive, several pages long if you do it all at once. We're putting it online if anyone wants to use it. And it's broken up into communication, teamwork, all those sorts of things. And I get them to do it at the beginning in their plan, their learning plan contract. And then I get them to talk about it in their other assessments about how they can see the growth. And at the end, they do it again as a reflection, but this is where I really now think I was at the beginning, and this is where I really am now. So they're conscious that I get them to reflect on how they are aware that they're being given opportunities to grow in their will placement, and then at the end I get them to kind of pick a number and say, yes, actually I did grow. Fantastic. But then I was saying there's the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you only do it pre and post, you'll get the Dunning-Kruger effect, which says, I thought I was really good at teamwork until I found what teamwork was really about. So you can actually get a decline, which is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So that's why you've got to do it at the end again as a now reflect on yourself.
Thanks, Carol.
I'm slightly different. We actually deliver a work with a learning subject with Mark Grimholt, so I'm from AMP, with an actual training subject, which is in the master's program here. Part of that, they will get a job at the end, so we actually go through a recruitment process and give them a bit of a report, just profiles, strengths, weaknesses, triggers for behaviour changes. And they come down to the academy with Martin down in Sydney. We'll expose them to things like urban brain, thinking styles, and a big part of the assessment for that subject is client meetings, because that's what they're going to be doing when they're working with RDP. So just explain to the ladies here. Formal assessment, we actually get external actors in from NIDA and ex-planners to give feedback, so they get feedback on the spot. Just to compound it, we put some cameras in the room, which we explain to them and we practice beforehand. And overnight we download all that. They have to watch it and reflect. What did 3 things they did well, 3 things I want to change. They'll come back to one of my coaches for some one-on-one time the next morning. And a little bit cheeky of us, but we'll hold their results until they've done that reflection. And then they do that 2 more times as a formal assessment.
Did you say this
times
is the AMP?
Financial
Yeah, so I
planning
mean, it's
skills.
real work at the end.
Yes,
And
so
why does that make sense in that context? Oh, you can ask them all that because it's real work at the end. What degree is not meant to be real work?
Yeah, we've got that luxury of working.
But like any will placement.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, and the resources, but I think one of the underlying things is the resourcing around that. Great activity, but it is well resourced, you know, videos, the coaches, all those, so you've got all those elements that are so integral to learning.
And it comes back to one of your earlier slides, the photo of that trust between Mark's team and my team, setting that up. It's been a lot of time to get this program wherever it is.
Yeah, there is a lot of collaboration, and it is university, industry, and student. And that's often the university and the industry work together, but they don't bring that student in as much. But I'm just hoping.
I'm not sure we necessarily did the same thing in terms of examples. But I was just reflecting on that, the use of the term coaches there. You know, I'd like to see that sort of terminology, that thinking shifting to our, you know, courses in terms of the being a coach rather than being a lecturer. Because it's, you know, as soon as you've got that title lecturer, it's like, well, I'm going to lecture, and this is me telling you, what, you know, I'm the knowledge expert, you're the student, and it's very passive in that sense. So shifting to that student, from that student identity to that professional identity and challenges and trying to move students from that. I have some examples of that, but I'm not sure that we consistently build that into our courses as much as we need to.
And on deliberate choice we've restructured many times on conference too. But we've kept it planner, development, coaches. So they are there to develop you as your language student, but in our language planners. And that does shift our mindset as well in the conversations this morning.
That fits in very well with the industry processes. So to discuss learning opportunities in industry circumstances, supervision activities, what you've obviously done. I think the other thing is establishing a learning culture that accepts the students. Obviously you have that already, because a lot of the time these industries see students as burdens. Well, I know in healthcare that's pretty generic. Well, you know, we've got a student here. So I think preparing the staff to effectively supervise, provide feedback, and I'd like Kelly's mentioned the assessment before learning, a lot of the work around feedback. I know that David Bowdens is another one of the fellows. He talks about when he talks about feedback as a very student, we'll call it a coach sort of process. And so therefore it's not the student just taking on the feedback, it's actually the student taking on the feedback, but then giving feedback to the coach about how effective that feedback was. So it just becomes this cycle. So then the coach will actually build on that. So there's plenty of space for that sort of cyclic notion of feedback and creating cultures. And I think I like when you raise the concept of trust, because in a lot of the literature out of Harvard, it's around psychological safe environments. So people are in a psychological safe environment that they can express the limitations and those sorts of things.
Okay. We were talking about feedback there. I think one of the most important things, students don't receive what because we're giving them stuff back as feedback. They don't know that it's feedback.
Yeah.
They can't identify the different. So I know in my second year course I really go and explain this is the feedback you're going to get, so that they understand, because some of the stuff comes back they don't realise it's.
I can remember a physio talking to me one day. She says, I actually sit down with the student and I say, this is feedback.
Yeah.
And she actually says to the student, you are now receiving feedback. Because, because I've actually written a paper in the nursing literature and it says, they told me what I did wrong, but they didn't give me any feedback. Because that was what one of the students actually said.
Yeah, this is what we picked up through our courses. That we were giving all this feedback. The students didn't understand that it was feedback. And so we had to go and explain it. They'd get to our evaluations and go, I got no feedback. And we're going, but we're giving you this and this and this and this.
I suppose it comes down to the fact that many of them don't know how to engage with it. They don't know how to apply it because we give it in such a way that it is, here's what you've done, and not, here's what you could do. So they see it as, well, I don't know what that means. I don't know what he means by that. If it was phrased in a way that was, next time you could try this, because this would help you to then do this better, that helps them to engage with that. So I always talk about it in terms of, this is feedback from how you did it now. Here's some feedback. Here are 3 things that you could do that would help you to improve the district.
Well, I did, but
Yeah.
do that now.
We've talked about that.
Yeah. But it's interesting that their perception of it is very different.
Yeah.
So I'm actually, if you come across this, Kelly, in the partner, because that is actually where critical the value of the student as a partner. It's like, this is feedback, what do you understand by? And that's that partner. Have you had any experience in that space?
I think it's similar. I mean, it's just how do you understand what the student's need is? How do you have conversations and more dialogue around it so that that trust and that psychological safety you're talking about, they can actually hear it too? That's a big thing. I typically also have conversations when I start things with students and we keep going. Just how do you want to talk about how we're going to improve together? How do you talk about this? And that's really useful because some students say, if I sit with them to an assignment and some projects and I talk to some people, they did poorly, and I said, how do you think you did on this task? How do you think you did? So I asked them first to tell me what they say and to try to build, like it makes it just a bit more conversation. When you have smaller classes, it's easier to do that. When you have larger classes, it's much more challenging, but feedback is such a problem. I like the idea of sort of guidance, improving learning. What I know in our forums, at least at my university, is feedback. That's a question I pose every time.
So thanks for that. So so this is the student process. In relation, students need to become acquainted with the different languages of the university and the workplace. That's something critical when we're looking at developing agency and developing the student to be active in this space, because until they become very cognizant of what it is they're going into, they're not able to be active. The sorts of things that we talked about around identity professionalism is developing their agency, and then I think it's about we probably talk about this in the end, but the exposure to students, and I know that a number of courses try and get students in that exposure into the workplace and the norms very early in the program, so that they have some understanding. Because I know I overheard one of the comments at this table is that students don't want to. Basically, students can't see the purposes of why they have to develop communication skills, why they have to understand their identity. So it's about sort of placing them in a context where this actually becomes relevant to them very early on.
Yeah, to say earlier that the process of self-reflection happens too late for some of these students. It's too late in second year and third year. We need to bring it right back. And a very simple example of a course that we're tweaking still, we've turned employment relations around to work and employability, so they get the framework of what is work. The employability side of it is that they produce a portfolio and a LinkedIn profile with quite a lot of specifications sitting in there. And part of what they do too is to tap the Griffith Graduate Attributes table, and they interpret their competency, their confidence, or whatever it might be through a STAR system, if you like, and their other courses.
our next step is then to get them to write. Where was I? Where am I now? What's my growing confidence? And this is first year, first semester.
Actually, it's a big step, so you've got something here that you want to add?
I was just saying, psychology is doing exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Very similar.
Yeah, I've been,
Very,
so
very good.
yeah, I've been working with University of Sunshine Coast who just turned flip curriculum, and what they do first year, first semester, they have simulations, and once upon a time they come into the laboratory, and I know the scientists have the same issue, they come to the laboratory and they step the students through. Well, they've changed theirs around, so the students, before they come into the laboratory, there's a pre-reading, and they actually have to document, it's called a check-in, check-out model. What am I going to learn today? How is the best way for me to learn it? And then at the end of it, what have I learned today? What are their gaps to around what? And they have to complete all that as part of an e-portfolio. So I think what you're shifting is right on the mark. So yeah.
I was just going to add to what Catherine says. I think it should start at first year, but my experience has been when we do reflection at third year, students don't know how to reflect properly, deeply, and critically. So I get faced with teaching them the process, which should have started not just do the reflection, but how do you actually reflect to where it develops your cognitive skills.
And that goes back to that, and you mentioned this before, that goes back to that very, very deep need for a programmatic approach to curriculum design. Full stop. That's why they don't understand what feedback is. If you can't reflect, then the feedback's somewhere out there in space.
Although I suppose there's problems depending on the program. So if you look at something like the Bachelor of Science, which has all these different majors, but there's no clear goal for a student in a sense as to where they fit, because they're all in, and it's not tailored for a specific, like pharmacy students, like the student from this morning, you knew exactly what a pharmacist needs to do and needs to know. But for BSc, your maths, physics, biochemistry, clinical sciences, environmental science, there's so many in there, they don't have probably the same sense of direction for when they get to the endpoint.
Yeah.
And some of them haven't even decided what major they're in until they get into their third year. So
And that's a problem, isn't it?
it is a major problem, I
It's a
think.
massive problem for their employment.
And they're the ones that are sort of a little bit lost, I think.
Yeah.
Also, just wondering how that works as well, when you, particularly in first year, where you might have students coming in and they're very green to what, they might have no background in what you're teaching in the degree potentially it's the first time. And the first year might be very comprehensive in terms of lots of basics. And you do individual courses within the program are very specific to specific areas. And you might reflect obviously on that, but in terms of that overall learning and where your place in industry might be, those bigger picture sort of things, there's certainly thinking of our context, I can't think of a point where the students are actually engaged to take that step back and think, there'll be assessment and reflection in each individual course, but the elements of that course might be something they think, well, yeah, I've learned that I'm more interested or less interested in this area, I'm getting a sense, but we don't actually say, where are you, where do you want to go?
Yeah, and I think possibly then it goes back to thinking about to be employed or employable and to have a career in lifelong learning and all of those kinds of things. When you go to industry and you ask, what do you want students to have, the first, depending on what literature you read, the first 7, 10, 15 things have got nothing to do with discipline. And so that's and so you can ask them to start reflecting on those things from first year. Here's what industry wants you to have: communication, problem solving, critical thinking, analysis, blah, blah, blah. In this course, how have we already contributed to that for you? And that's separate to the discipline stuff that you've started to develop. And that way then they can start to see, and one of my colleagues from science uses the terms seeing forest for the trees. They start to develop that understanding in those courses where it's not as clear.
But you're right, you need to introduce those bigger picture elements into the sort of discipline specific things that might be learning.
Yeah, and that way then they can start to tie all of those together at least to start doing that math.
So could I
the
make
broader courses, the more you need that roadmap type idea and the more it needs to evolve very early on. So that students can, even if they don't know exactly where they might end up, they can kind of start to look at some professional fields and say, oh, well, I really like this area, I really like that area. I'm going to try and start to steer myself towards that as possible goals of where I might end up at the end.
Especially in those programs, sorry,
That's
Patty,
okay.
especially in those programs where there isn't that clear, very clear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously accountants, you're gonna end up, as an accountant typically.
Yeah.
It's the
So
same,
you
Bachelor
can
of Science, be Bachelor of Paramedicine.
Yeah.
Very, sorry.
So I just wanted to say, we now have, a technology that can support exactly what you guys are talking about from day one, even pre-day one, but day one all the way through. So with the implementation of PebblePad as a platform, students get that account day one and they can, and we can work with you and BLAs and EDs are doing about this too, to develop ways for them to reflect ongoing through their whole career. So they not only can do that, but they can look back, oh, that's where I was, that's what I was doing, now I'm here. Or they can say, oh, I didn't know, as you were talking about, I didn't really know what teamwork means, and I said I was a 6. Well, now I'm a 4, but I know it means this. And they can keep that information in one space over their whole program, so they can see their growth and reflect on that over time. That's exciting.
So just one more thing about that example I was giving. It's a 4-step process there that you get them to do the career focus that probably a number of you are familiar with. And the purpose is to get them to think about what their major is going to be. But what does that mean for your employability? So if you're going to be an accountant, what kind of accountant are you going to be? What are you going to, you know, and we've got talking head interviews with various people. And the reflective process is amazing, where they say, I had no idea that's what these people do. I'm on the wrong path, or I'm on the right path, it's affirmed or whatever. So that process is really good for them to be able to focus. Instead of mindlessly going through taking core courses and not knowing till the last minute what they're going to choose next. So establishing some of that, I think, is really important, and then getting them to actually physically write down something and express what it means to them. Which we just done this for the second semester, but it's
Yeah, so just to finish off, the last process is university outcomes, and of course university outcomes is all about compliance. But then there's also the other around feedback from students, feedback from industry, feedback. So it's about feedback from the academics, so that's a critical part around that outcome element. The industry outcomes are certainly less tangible, but there's that sort of contemporary knowledge, work-ready graduates, professional growth for the staff within the organisation, which is often, it's not that explicit in the literature, but when you go and talk to people, it's fairly explicit. So yeah, come to my idea, you probably have some great examples. But I think the critical thing is the student outcomes. And so what it is if the student has got this sort of structure around them that enables this, that they have developed the agency, the language of the university, the industry, is that the student goes into the workplace as a proactive being. So they can go in and they can then talk, they can explore the problems to be solved, questions to be answered, issues to be addressed, positions to be critiqued. So then when the student's on their work integrated learning placement, if this sort of sort of breadth of opportunities, it's like, well, you're situated in the workplace here. You decide your project. You negotiate it with the industry, with the university. What is it that you're going to produce as demonstrated of that you've reached the learning outcomes? And this is where we talk about the PebblePad, is that if they're clear about the learning outcomes right from the outset, they've been familiar with them, they're immersed in this industry, they've developed the skills of agency, that they can then go out and they can be very active in this space of determining their own learning outcomes and demonstrating that the learning outcomes that they are actually going to achieve are commensurate with the learning outcomes that have to be achieved. So that is sort of where that sort of good scaffolding around the student enables the optimising workplace learning. I will actually talk about one other point around workplace learning, and workplace behaviour is an important factor about work outcome, because that's one of the other things that's big on what the industry wants. And what I thought I'd just share with you is that it's an extract from an assessment tool that we use in nursing. It's very similar to one that the midwives use, and it was basically plagiarised from physiotherapy. Megan Dalton, who was actually working here at Griffith Uni, led a lot of this work through an ALTC grant many years ago. and so it's all publicly available. But just to share with you, one of the things that came from this is that we developed these cues around for students around sort of what sorts of things are expected of them. And having been in a workplace, I've been working as a nurse for over 35 years, so I sort of felt that they were pretty straightforward. But it was interesting because when we gave these cues to the students and said, look, as a assessment instrument to guide what is expected of you, do you feel, is this useful to you? How do you feel about it? Is this attainable? And I was really quite stunned. Quite a few of the students sort of picked up all these cues and went, oh, this is great. We finally know what we're supposed to be doing here. So I sometimes think it's not always as clear cut, but I think ideally then what we're doing, I know with what one of the universities are doing now, is that they're taking this back to the students and saying, okay, one of the cues is practice sensibly in a cultural environment. So what would that look like? How do you think that you should be behaving? And getting the students to engage with those cues and the meaning of those cues. So that was something I wanted to share. So we've run out of time, so I will finish off. I'd like to say thank you, Francisco, as a professor in workplace learning at Charles Sturt University. We're hoping in the next few weeks that the framework will be published. The Office of Learning and Teaching in Canberra. And I'd also like to thank Missio. He was instrumental in assisting with my fellowship application. So thank you. That's all right. And thank you.